Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the National Bleav Network, and joining me for some insight into a potential Giannis to the Rockets deal and everything that's going on in that situation is a reporter for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and co-host of the Milwaukee Bucks Point Forward podcast. It's Jim Owczarski, and it's great to have you, Jim, because our fan base, they can't wait to hear the Bucks' perspective on this and everything we can find out about what's going on right now.
The thing to remember and to know, and I think some national reporters have tried to emphasize this, Giannis Antetokounmpo has not asked for a trade. He has never asked for a trade. There's no intention of asking for a trade, or at least there hasn't been. I guess just broadly speaking for a different audience, this type of thing, which meaning Giannis maybe casting a wandering eye, is not new for the Bucks organization, for Bucks fans. He has said some version of, well, if they don't want to win, then I don't want to be here. Or if they want to rebuild, I don't want to be here. Or as long as they want to win, I'm committed. And he has said some version of that, Robert, I would say since the 2017 offseason. It hasn't been regular. It follows a pattern. And the pattern is generally a couple of years before he's due to sign another extension. And in this case, he is extension eligible next offseason. He said something very similar to sort of the report that ESPN had lottery night that sort of started all this up again. He told that, hey, as long as, I don't know, if the team doesn't want to win, and then they traded for Dame Lillard. And then in 2020, after the bubble, I don't know, I want to know where the team's going. And then they traded for Drew Holiday. He signed an extension. So, and even back, I think his first extension, Robert, which was not, he was not this version of Giannis. It was always about, well, if the team is going to commit, if the team's going to spend. So that's the background here. It's just a thing that happens on a regular basis. What I will allow is that this is a little different in that all those other years, the Bucks were the best team in the East. They were 58 wins, 60 wins, whatever it may be. And then, whether the playoffs worked out or not, they were the best team, 1 seed, 2 seed. That is not the case right now. They are regressing. They are getting worse. And so I will allow that part of this where he probably needs to hear what that plan is from John Horst, the Bucks general manager, ownership. Will they spend in the tax if need be? All inclinations I have is that they will if it's necessary. So that's the one, I would say, tinge of difference here, Robert, is just the team has gotten worse as he has gotten older. And so that's where the line graphs, so to speak, are maybe a little bit different than the previous versions of this sort of posturing from him.
As we record this early Monday afternoon, I heard about reports earlier today, I believe, that there was mutual interest with the Raptors. Is there anything to that? Do you buy any of that stuff?
He's never asked out or anything like that. I think Giannis is a global superstar in that way. Like, there's only a couple guys like him. All 29 other teams would have interest in him. So let's put it that way. Whatever that may look like. And as far as Giannis himself, look, he lives in Greece. He's a citizen of the world. So I don't know, like, he loves Milwaukee, and again, I've never expressed any true interest in not playing here. But, if he were to move on, I think, again, who knows what would fit, what would check his boxes. So I would just say, Robert, I think any of the other 29 teams would want him. And then where he would like to go is really impossible to say, because frankly, he has never spoken about that in any sort of real way ever in his, 12 years in Milwaukee.
It's hard to say because you're, a reporter there, but do you have a gut feeling about whether he would stay in Milwaukee? I mean, what's your feeling at this moment as we sit here on June the 2nd?
I could go with my reporting, which was through the combine about a month ago or a few weeks ago, which was, again, no inclination to ask for a trade, to want to be out. And so that's, kind of where I'm at. These guys, he doesn't go to Greece for a little bit yet before he starts to ramp up to the Greek national team in Eurobasket. That probably will be the next update we get from him, is when he meets with the Greek media before Eurobasket. Look, it's pro sports, Robert, so there are no absolutes. Like, fans and media in Dallas probably, that maybe turned everything on its head, but that seems like such an exception, Robert. Again, I don't know if this is the summer for that. Again, he's got 2 years left on his deal with a player option, so effectively 2 full seasons of team control. And I will say this, even if he were to finally get to the point of saying, you know what, it's been a great run, I would like to play elsewhere. He is under contract for 2 more years. And I'm not quite sure how fast ownership in Milwaukee would be to just say sure about that. So I think even if he were to get to that point or discuss that on a serious, truly serious level, Robert, I'm not sure it's as cut and dry as a simple trade request would be, just in my opinion.
His stats appeared to be peak Giannis. Like we saw maybe the best version of him this year. Was this his best season, do you think?
I think offensively, yes, Robert. Like he is, and this is credit to him. I would argue that in some way he has gotten better offensively since his last two MVPs, since he won MVPs. So this year, the mid-range was not just a passing fancy or a fad or a small sample size blip. Like he was throughout the season for 70 games, whatever he played. It was, DeMar DeRozan, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and then there's Giannis Antetokounmpo, like in that mid-range area, because he understands that as he gets into his 30s, the pounding, the drives to the rim, and the physical toll that takes, it's not sustainable. At some point, he will lose that step, right? As all players do as they age. So he's begun to work that mid-range in. The free throws, I think, are next, Robert. That's still been, the biggest probably bugaboo for him his entire career. 3-point line, I don't think that's part of this going forward, at least not for a while yet. So yeah, offensively, especially when Damian Lillard was injured, Robert, Doc Rivers put the ball in his hands more to create more offense. He averaged nearly a triple-double down the stretch. And I think that part of his game is getting better as well, like the processing of defenses and being able to make quicker decisions. What's new was Doc put him in the elbows, and that was a different operating space for him as a passer. And you saw that get a little better, too, as the year went on. And the reason I'm saying offensively, Robert, is because there has been a dip defensively. I mean, since he was a DPOY, he hasn't made all defensive teams in the last few years. There's a reason for that. Their combination with Brook Lopez is Brook is the primary drop big. Giannis is that sort of help defender. It's still there. Giannis could still turn it up defensively, but he's not that like sort of night in, night out monster on the defensive end. And I think a large part of that, though, is he has taken a much greater offensive load over these last few years. And that's generally been due to injuries to Chris Middleton and Dame. Like he's just had to be more on offense. And that's just, you're going to lose a little bit. And that's where you see that little bit of a slip is he's not that all defensive team player, but it is in there though, when needed. And he just sort of more picks and chooses his spots for that.
Yeah. I was going to ask you because, it feels like he's definitely had more or greater offensive load. So I was wondering, if that had, something to do with it. So that's very interesting. Also, I just want to ask in a couple of minutes because the Rockets fans obviously want to know if something were to happen, how could they fit into a potential trade? But I just want to remind our listeners real quick that we need your Rockets takes. Let me know in the YouTube comments. Look for a new show also on Wednesday with one of my regular analysts looking at NBA playoff lessons for the Rockets. And as always, support us and get updates on every show we drop by subscribing on YouTube, and definitely give us a quick thumbs up. Listen while you're driving, working out, or making dinner with your favorite podcast app as well. All right, Jim, what do you think could draw Giannis to Houston, if anything, if he makes this decision? The hope here is, potentially the tax situation, the Nigerian connection with Udoka. I mean, obviously we just heard the maybe connection with Toronto, and then the direction of the franchise, how the Rockets are moving. What do you think?
Yeah. So again, just to clarify after your break there, he's not asked for a trade. And, that as near as I can tell with my reporting is there's just, that is not where he's at yet. But I understand why I'm here. And Houston tends to be, sort of pegged as a potential destination, and for, I guess, good reasons, right? A lot of future draft picks, a very good coach, and a team that appears to be on the rise. So let's take all those steps and just assume, for fun here, Robert, everything checks the boxes, and John Horst is going to look at all options, right? Look, just as a sort of cursory view over the Rockets, like they are already over the luxury tax, right, for next year. So I don't want to bore a ton of people with aprons and tax things, but the reason I mentioned that it is sort of important because Giannis makes $54 million this year. He's going to make $58 next year. And I would imagine the intent would be to sign him to another supermax, which now he will be making upwards of $60 to $75 million into his age 35, 36, 37 seasons. I say that to say like that's part of the calculus And I will tell you that what I do know, Robert, is the Bucks would not be interested in just saying, you know what, best wishes, buddy, have fun. Their goal would be to take the best players, not just picks, from the team that they're trading him to. Obviously, Şengün makes the most sense in a lot of ways. I don't know the fit of him and Giannis together as bigs. So there's that. Is it a Şengün and Reed Shepherd? And honestly, I would say no, because probably Amen Thompson's the best player. I've heard some Rockets fans here, social media, I'm on Blue Sky, Reddit, like, oh, Amen Thompson. There are no untouchables when it comes to Giannis Antetokounmpo. I would think Amen Thompson, Reed Shepherd are starting points, and that's only $19 million. Where's the other $32 million? I don't know if it's just as easy as Şengün. Maybe it is. Maybe it's Cam Whitmore and Tari Eason. Like, I hate to say that, but the Bucks, Robert, I don't think are in any great shakes or interest to just take a player to take a player. I think it'd be all the draft picks and who they deem can help them be a 45 to 50 win team in the East.
Let me ask you this, because, if a Giannis deal happens, it's typically based on where the star wants to go. So he'll sign that extension. You want to get him there, and that's when you're going to give up all the capital. So my guess is if he makes that decision, at best, maybe there's 2 or 3 or 4 teams that are going to be in this discussion. And I've made the point of the potential suitors. And I know Milwaukee's like, we want Amen. Amen's the guy. Well, the Rockets look at it as he's their best player right now. And if you told me, okay, you can have Amen and then you can have a bunch of junk with that, I think maybe Rockets fans would seriously think about it. But if you're like, I want all the draft picks and I want Amen and I want all this stuff, you're turning the Rockets into the Milwaukee Bucks where they are right now. So what's the point of the trade? And this is where I've made the point with my listeners, and I want to get your viewers, and I want to get your thoughts on this, because of the potential suitors, the teams that we are hearing about. Toronto, I don't know. That's like a new version, and I'm kind of wondering why he would want to go there to begin with. But, maybe the relationship, obviously, with their general manager, if that's the case. But the Rockets, I've said, have the best combo of great young player on a value contract in Şengün. And I'm putting Şengün in the deal because, like you said, I've said, those two might not play all that well together, but also, Şengün would be a great contract for you guys. You don't want to be in the luxury tax. You want to be able to go out and add pieces because of the situation that you're in at that point. And the Rockets would also have what I say is the best combo of best player on a value contract, but also real value draft picks, because it does you no good to tank. And they have 3 Suns picks and the Nets pick swap. I mean, you tell me, you've looked around probably at other teams' draft choices. I've said the Spurs, that people talk about the Hawks picks. The Hawks are in the 7 and 8 seed every year. I mean, I don't see the Suns in a crowded and loaded West where they couldn't even do it this year, all of a sudden figuring this out. And and you've already got a lottery pick, with this year's Suns pick. And I don't see OKC, although they have a litany of picks, their value picks aren't that great. And I just don't see them making a deal as to where they are right now in the franchise in the finals. And I don't, their 2 best players are young and cheap, exactly what you want. Whereas Şengün is about to hit this new extension that he's got. But the key is, Jim, he's not hitting an extension that's a fun max. So even you trade to Toronto and Scotty Barnes is the price. And I would say Şengün's better than Scotty Barnes. He's an all-star out in the West this year. And, he seems to be growing by the day. I would say that the Rockets have the best value contract of a young player to give you guys. And because you can't get back, unless New Orleans is ready to play ball with you, you're not going to get back all your picks. You might get back a couple of them, but I don't know if Portland and New Orleans is like a 4-team trade to try to get back all those picks and pick swaps. It makes no sense. So you have to get back value picks, and you have to get back a guy that's not going to be terrible. You don't want to be terrible when there's no benefit of you being terrible once he's out the door. So Şengün is a really good player to start with. I mean, the Rockets feel like he's their best player, and they just won 52 games in a loaded Western Conference. So I don't know. Do you agree with me, at least on this sort of, thought process here?
And again, I think that's why Houston is brought up in a lot of these sort of possible scenarios, Robert, is because of that. What I'll say, and again, this sort of gets lost in the talking points because it's just not sexy part of rumor mill basketball, but it's here in Milwaukee. It's important to note that the ownership group here building a new hotel next to Fiserv Forum, the Bucks Arena. There's a new music venue going up next to Fiserv Forum, the luxury hotel they just built a couple years ago. So it's very brand new. They've created this they call it the Deer District around the arena. Rockets fans may have seen it if they recall the 2021 finals with all the people outside kind of watching on Jumbotrons. Like this ownership group has a big business investment around the arena, and that's because of what's in the arena. They've got a sellout streak. And the reason I bring all this up is because draft picks are fun to talk about in a vacuum. I'm not sure how much draft picks move the meter for ownership. They understand it's part of it. Let's just pretend this happens draft day and the number 10 pick, right? Or whatever that is. Okay, that's probably a rotation player at best. Let's be real. You need top 4 picks, lottery winners.
I blow that whole thing up because I have said, let's look at who's left right now. You have SGA was around the 10th pick. Giannis was, not 15th. A high pick.
He was 15th, yeah.
SGA and Giannis, last I checked, were top 3 in MVP.
Joker, yeah.
is also top 3 in the MVP, was a second-round draft choice. Tyrese Halliburton slipped to about around this point.
Sure.
I talked about this last week where they all landed, but you start looking, Jalen Brunson. I mean, we start looking at the guys that were around or the best players or the MVP guys. So you can say, hey, you got to be a top 4 pick. No, you've got to be good at making picks. And I guess my concern, if I was a Milwaukee Bucks fan, more than the fact that Giannis wants out the door, is that Horst has not done a great job the last few years and getting value with those picks to help out Giannis.
And again, Giannis hasn't asked out yet there, Robert. But like where I was going with that was, sure, picks are great, but the business of basketball in Milwaukee, this is not a town. Like I was there Giannis's rookie year, the year before when they were a middling team, and there was 4,000 people in the arena. This is not a group that wants that. And let's be real, we're talking about trading the franchise legend, the best player in his prime. There's going to be backlash in town, whether he actually asks for it or not. And
sure,
the idea of look at all these unnamed future draft picks is not going to go over in terms of jersey sales, concession. So what I'm saying there is like Şengün is right. That would make sense. Again, Thompson, I think would be a non-negotiable. And I mentioned Reed Shepherd. Like those are 3 players who kind of hit the $54 million that Giannis makes. Is that palatable to Houston? Do they feel then if you lose that and you gain Giannis, that's a good trade, knowing now you are bumping up into apron territory, Robert? And quite frankly, Giannis is not the easiest superstar to build around. He is, for as good as his offense has been, and we talked about that, you need shooting, like 4-out shooting. He has said this. His favorite offense is 4-out. I don't know if Fred and Jalen and Dylan and Jabari Smith are like making 40% of threes. So even if that all works together in Houston, I think that's a hard look for their front office and Ime as well, is how do we now retool this roster around this player when we weren't built that way to begin with, but now we're in first to second apron roster building territory. And so I think that's the non-sexy, unfun part of the mechanics of this. Is I don't think the Bucks are just going to say, oh, let's take all the draft picks. That'll be a big part of it. Don't get me wrong, but the good players need to come with it. And then the picks can come and then they could do whatever it is they're going to do with those, because they're going to want to win 45 games. Giannis, no Giannis, Dame, no Dame. Like this is an ownership that wants to go to the playoffs and still make noise in the East. That's just what it is. And so to your point of the roster, like the best offers to make, if we go down the line here, Robert, like I could also see a scenario where it's the Kobe thing in 2007, where he was done with LA. They're not contending. They're not winning. He sent me to Chicago, and the Lakers said, well, we're taking everything. And Kobe said, well, then we're just going to be worse. Why don't I just stay? And so so there's a lot of leaps here. But in terms of Houston, I think like if it were me, that's how it would have to shake out. Are those 3 really young players and all the picks? And then, then that's a Houston problem, I guess, after that.
I would tell Milwaukee fans, the ones that might be interested in this, just the Rockets are not giving up Şengün and Amen, because basically, if you ask the Rockets, they think their best player in a couple of years is going to be Amen. And I would say they would probably tell you their second best player is Şengün. And basically, like I said, if you trade those two guys and draft choices, and Reed Shepherd and all that stuff, you're basically Milwaukee, and that's not the point of the trade. And this is why when superstars get traded, they typically do not get back what the value is of that guy, because if you do, then that team is back where the other team was. You're just swapping places. That's all it is. And I think the most significant thing that happened for Milwaukee, and the best thing that happened for Milwaukee, is Jason Tatum's injury. Because no disrespect to the Knicks, Pacers, or Cavs, but it would make much more sense for Giannis to stay in the Eastern Conference right now and sort of rely on that rebuild with Milwaukee. And that leads me to the last question that I wanted to ask you. If he stays, how can the Bucks get better? How do they do that with what they've got?
Obviously, the biggest question, it's the one he wants answered, right? As we started this podcast, Robert, where I said it is different. He wants to see a clearer path to more wins and a top 3 seed, right? And the team ascending rather than regressing as it has. Now, just very quickly, so I won't bore Rockets fans with the Bucks sort of minutia, but they do actually have more options this summer. They've got a biannual. They've got a non-tax $14.2 million that they can spread among a couple players. They've got a trade exception from Chris Middleton in the summer. They can trade their 2031 or 32 first-round pick if they choose, or pick and a swap. And one thing we know about the Bucks, Robert, is, to coin the phrase from LA, or the LA Rams, F them picks. They have not been shy about if they can get a guy and it costs, a future pick 8 years. So they have more options this summer to add quality talent than they have in 5 years, Robert. Is that enough to have the big fella say, hey, okay, I can rock with all of this? But to your point, nothing happens in a vacuum. Tatum's out, and we already knew either Drew Holiday or Kristaps Porzingis were going to get dealt for salary purposes. So the Celtics, you're right, that's that. The Cavs just aren't going to win 64 games. The eras of it's just the math says they're not going to be that great again. And to your point, the Pacers won 2 more games. The Knicks won 2 more games than the Bucks just this past year alone. The Bucks actually won the season series over Indiana this past season. So to your point, Robert, I do think all of that, what's happened since the Bucks were eliminated, the idea of winning and being a higher seed in the East is not as far-fetched as it seemed maybe a month ago. And you're right, that will play a big role in sort of these summer discussions.
Yeah, and I was also thinking in terms of, you need role players, you need shooters around Giannis. Well, we just saw Malik Beasley get signed very cheap by Detroit. Those are the types of moves that you can make. And I feel like it's going to be a bad market for role players with the current CBA and where things are at right now. So I think that is very helpful for Milwaukee. Also, the fact that really there's not a lot of cap space roaming around the NBA right now. The other part that I think you said that's interesting, you said you have the 31 and 32 draft choice. Here's a sample, and you can tell me what you think about this, but I was just thinking, hey, you could take that. Brooklyn has 4 first-round picks. They're not going to want to, do that. They're not going to want to draft 4 first-round guys. You could take the 30 or 31 or 32 draft choice and give it to Brooklyn for a couple of their first-round draft choices, and even make it a top 3 protected on your end. And that's a way to get 2 really good role players. And the advantage right now is, what's tough is a lot of the guys have gone back in the draft. So it's not as deep as you thought it would be. But there is an advantage going on right now. These guys have decided to stay so long in college. It should help Milwaukee, because the guys that are going to come out in the first round, they've got a lot more experience. This isn't drafting the 19-year-olds that just could walk in and, Giannis is going to have to baby him for 3 years before they're willing to give you anything. These are guys that are veterans that are coming in if you can get some mid-round, first-round picks right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think John Horst, if there's anything he has shown in his tenure as GM, is creativity, a willingness to think outside the box and make trades. I do know you mentioned that the draft history has not been great. Some would argue that's the price you pay when you're picking at the end of the first round. A lot of times, the Bucks built their teams differently. They traded those picks, right, for Drew and Dame, PJ Tucker, etc. But to your last point, that would be interesting to see if they were to leverage that 31, not for a player, but for more current draft capital. That would be very interesting and very forward-thinking, Robert. We see it in the NFL all the time. And so with this new CBA, to your point, that could be pretty interesting. And again, I wouldn't put anything past Jon Horst in that way. Look, he very quietly signed an extension during the playoffs. Ownership clearly trusts him to do this again around their best player. That's what he's charged with. And I would think they will, knowing John a little bit, all of those rocks will get flipped over for sure.
Yeah. And I actually thought of it in some ways because when we saw what happened with the Suns and they traded that future first for 3 firsts, I don't think their value was nearly good enough. But I feel like it makes much more sense for Milwaukee on a pick like this if you put in I think you have to put in protections there, but I definitely think that would be perfect for Milwaukee. And I think there's a way for them to compete if they can make some of the right moves, but they're going to have to Horst is going to have to do a lot of like really good moves, like 3 or 4. He's going to have to put together a really good offseason where he does all of that stuff, bang, bang, bang. And, you're going to have to catch a break or something like that. But I can't wait to see what happened. Can you let people know a little bit about how they can follow your work and connect with you guys as well?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. JSonline.com is probably just the easy way to find us. Obviously, we stay on top of all the Giannis news or non-news for that matter, if there is. And then on almost all social media platforms with my name, Jim Owczarski, just type that in. I'm on Blue Sky, not on the other app, but all the other sort of platforms, you can find me with that handle as well. And Robert, it's kind of that time of year. Again, sort of used to Giannis sort of flexing a little bit in these summers. And so I'm sure as we get to the draft, we'll hear some sort of update on what he's feeling like. But again, as we end this, he has not asked for a trade out as of yet. I don't believe this is the summer for that, but it is sports. They are humans. This is not AI. So there are no absolutes. And I guess you always got to allow for that little bit of, wow, something really changed.
Well, I can't wait to find out what happens. This is going to be a fun summer, and I really appreciate you doing this. And thanks again for the time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the invite. Thank you.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.